So I picked up and have been playing Bayonetta 3 for the last 24 hours or so, and my initial thoughts and opinions on the game is it's very, very good. I'm very happy with Bayonetta 3 in general. I think Platinum Games did a fantastic job, especially as this game has been in development for about 5 years or so, and we've been waiting for it to come out. Especially fans of Bayonetta really are going to get a lot of fun and enjoyment out of this game. But let's talk about the elephant in the room with Bayonetta 3, and that has to do with performance. Now, performance of this game is quite honestly a little all over the place. Although the game itself targets 60 frames per second, most of the time it never comes close to actually hitting 60. There are occasions in the game where it may hit 60 depending on what you're doing, but it is something that I noticed very quickly when I started playing the game. Now, a lot of people are going to have a lot of fun playing Bayonetta 3. A lot of people won't even really notice that there's any frame rate issues because the game is so fast and there's always things going on at any given time. It's almost impossible to stop and just take a minute to kind of digest what's going on, which is a credit to the game because Platinum Games again did a really great job with Bayonetta 3. So I ended up doing some of my own real-world tests on Bayonetta 3, and as you can see here, the frame rate is just kind of all over the place. In regular battles like this one here, you'll notice that the frame rate can dip anywhere as low into the high 30s. In some instances, it may hit 60, but it certainly doesn't hold its 60 FPS at all. So one thing that I thought would be interesting was to see if a overclocked Nintendo Switch would have any impact on improving performance and frame rates. And the results here may surprise you. Now, before I continue, I do want to say that this is obviously using a modified Switch. This is not something that I condone anyone do. Overclocking can and probably will damage your Nintendo Switch, especially with prolonged use. So certainly don't do it. If you want to learn how to overclock your Nintendo Switch, this is not the video for you to watch. There are many guides out there and many other avenues for you to figure out how to mod your Switch. I'm certainly not going to show you how to do that on this particular episode. But with that said, let's go ahead and jump in and do some overclocking tests. So this battle here is running at stock clocks, and you can see the performance here as we noted previously. Now, if we go ahead and boost our Nintendo Switch and overclock it to a 1.5 gigahertz CPU, and over a 900 gigahertz GPU, you can absolutely see in these kind of closer battles that the frame rates do hit 60 and stay there for a longer duration. So there's definitely a performance increase here when it comes to overclocking the Nintendo Switch, and this is quite good. While it does hit 60 FPS more frequently and it overall is a smoother and better experience, it's certainly not a lock 60, but it is definitely better. Now, the second test was just sitting there idle on one of the city levels, and as you can see, we're running at 53 FPS on stock clocks, but when we overclock the Nintendo Switch to a 1.5 gigahertz CPU and an over 900 gigahertz GPU overclock, you can still see that the performance hasn't changed at all. It's exactly the same. So what is this telling us? Well, it's telling us that neither the CPU and the GPU are really the main culprits here. Although we saw that we are getting better performance when we are running those close-in engine battles, the overall issue here is one that has plagued many Nintendo Switch games over the years, and Bayonetta 3 is no exception, and that has to do with memory bandwidth. The Nintendo Switch has a pretty slow memory bandwidth. It's very, very slow, in fact, and it's one of the biggest bottlenecks of Nintendo Switch games in my experience. So to test this theory out, if we reduce the memory bandwidth to that of a portable Nintendo Switch, in other words, in portable mode at 1.3 gigahertz, you can see that performance has dipped to about 45 frames per second. Now, this is not the same test as running the game in handheld mode, and I want to be very clear that this is not the same thing. But if we then increase the memory clocks to the standard, which is 1.6 on a docked Nintendo Switch, you can see that it hits 53 FPS. And if we drop the memory clocks as low as we can, you can see that the frame rates have significantly tanked. So the real kind of key thing here is that we need more memory bandwidth. And unfortunately, there is no easy way to overclock the memory clocks higher than what Nintendo has provided for the Tegra X1. So at the end of the day, memory bandwidth is once again the biggest culprit of performance with Bayonetta 3. And although we can see increases in frame rates when we do increase the CPU clocks, in general, this is only during the battle sequences where there's a lot of particles and there's a lot of things going on screen at any given time. But at the end of the day, the Nintendo Switch is really struggling to keep up with Bayonetta 3. And I think this is probably the first game for me that really has opened my eyes up to what Platinum was trying to do and essentially really throw a lot at the aging Nintendo Switch hardware. I think overall they pulled it off, and I think the game itself is good, and even with its performance implications, it's still a very good game, and I do recommend you pick it up if you are a fan of the Bayonetta series. But overall, overclocking, while it does help this game, is very, very limited in the way it does help Bayonetta 3, and indeed many other Nintendo Switch games. We're going to really start to get to a point of the Nintendo Switch where we're starting to see these games really perform a lot less than they should be. Now, I think a Switch revision for me doesn't necessarily need to bring the world to the customer. You know, we've heard stories about 4K and DLSS and all sorts of things, but for me, a Switch revision really would be something simple along the lines of additional memory and additional memory bandwidth, including a slight CPU and GPU boost. I think those things would be enough for me to really be happy with what Nintendo's offering next, because we're starting to see these games really start to struggle, and I am curious about the next 12 to 24 months on the Nintendo Switch, what the games are going to start to look like. But I'm going to leave it here for this episode. What are your thoughts about Bayonetta 3? Did you pick it up on Friday? Are you enjoying the game? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm definitely having fun with the game, even with the performance issues. I'm still playing the game and enjoying it. I do think it's worth it, especially if you're a fan. But we're going to leave it here, guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. As always, if you liked it, don't forget to leave me a thumbs up, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye for now.